All right, welcome everyone to the Speed Traveler Roadshow here on KHTS Radio, AM 1220 and FM 98.1. You can also find the Speed Traveler Roadshow anywhere you get your podcasts. That's Apple, iHeart, Spotify. Definitely check us out there. You can also see us and on some of our videos on our social media, and that is at Instagram, at The Speed Traveler, and on YouTube, you can see lots of our videos at The Speed Traveler page on YouTube. I'm joined by Chris Evertsen today. Chris is calling in remotely because he had a couple race car issues in San Diego. How you doing today, Chris?
Well, doing very well, Charlie. And I guess you let the cat out of the bag a little bit there. I mean, double secret probation, super secret news on the new Speed Traveler race car that we'll be building for the second half. It'll be completed for the second half of the 2024 season and run a full campaign in 2025. But I guess the cat's out of the bag on that now.
Yeah, well, we'll tell everyone a little bit about what you found and what the plan is.
Oh, okay. Well, we found some really nice BMW E90 chassis. And the thought is on our half is that we're thinking that the E90 is probably going to become the next spec series chassis. For many, many years, it's been the BMW E46 chassis. And so we're going to build up these chassis into race cars. We're going to run them in what might be an E90 spec series in coming years, but we're definitely going to run it in the United States Touring Car Championship and try to defend our title that we earned in 2023.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting Speed Traveler news. And as I said earlier, if you go to our social media pages, you can see us in action in some of those posts. But let's talk a little bit about today's show. Our featured marque for today is Ferrari, and it sort of ties into some of our opening stories. A little bit later in the show, we're going to talk about some Ferraris that you can buy today that we think are going to double in value. Also, we're going to talk about Formula One news a little bit later in the show. But to start off, Chris, let's talk a little bit about Ferrari, the company, and some of their news for this past year.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because, it makes sense to talk about Ferrari, even though we've talked about them in the past. Everybody's a Ferrari fan, no matter what car you're a fan of, everyone's a Ferrari fan.
Right.
And, a couple of weeks ago, Lewis Hamilton announced that he is going to be moving to Ferrari in 2025. So it just makes sense to talk about Ferrari again.
Yeah, it really does. And as you said, we talked about Ferrari. I look back, I think it was about when we did the Ferrari featured marque, it was, I think, 23 shows ago. So, I think Ferrari twice a year is perfectly acceptable. But some Ferrari news. They did incredibly well last year. I see that, and you had mentioned this in one of our previous shows, but their EBIT, which is earnings before income tax, were $1.75 billion. I mean, unfreaking believable. In the last quarter, in the last quarter alone, where they had some other expenses, their profit was $400 million. And I would have thought that you would run out of rich people to buy these cars new a long, long time ago, but clearly Ferrari is proving everyone wrong, aren't they?
Yeah, they really are. And here's the thing, though. It's their classic cars are selling like hotcakes, and Ferrari actually does sell their previously owned cars. And then their new stuff is just unbelievable. I mean, if you scroll through the Ferrari website and look at some of the new stuff, oh my gosh, it's gorgeous stuff. So I guess it's not that surprising. And if you're going to sign Lewis Hamilton as a Formula One world champion as one of your drivers, you're going to have to write a pretty fat check. But clearly Ferrari is making the money to be able to do that.
Yeah, they really are. Their gross profit was up as well, or their gross sales were up last year on the sale of about 13,000 cars. It's pretty crazy because if you remember, it wasn't that long ago that Ferrari was such a niche brand. They built maybe 1,500 cars a year on the high side. Really there were years where they sold in the 70s and 80s where they sold $1,000, $1,200 or 1,200 cars. But Really
To
unbelievable.
put that in comparison, Toyota sold over 11 million cars.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I've got the exact unit number of vehicles produced. It was 13,663 in 2023, and they are expecting to sell. They are expecting to sell another 1,000 or so cars on average next year. So up over about 15,000 units produced and sold, and push them over 7 billion in sales. But man, talk about the net profit. I mean, that's a crazy net profit on the gross sales. So I don't know what Ferrari's doing exactly, but they're certainly doing something right.
they're making a great espresso, and they are working like busy little bees.
Yeah, they are. And a lot of those sales came from their Ferrari Portofino M car, which is that's the I guess that's the entry level Ferrari, which seems pretty crazy at $246,000. It's the entry level car, but the Ferrari Portofino is looks a lot like the California model. So the California model we're going to talk about a little later. 2000, they built that from 2008 to 2017. The Portofino replaced that Ferrari California, and so the entry level car is 246. It goes up. There's some special editions which we're not going to talk about prices, but it goes up to the highest priced of their main production line, and that's the SF, which is Squadra de Ferrari, right? SF90.
Correct.
And
Correct.
that is the SF90 Spider at $575,000. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty impressive. They're also going to produce apparently an SUV, and they've been talking about this for years. I actually haven't seen one yet, but apparently there's an SUV coming out soon.
Yeah. And that's, I guess everyone's got to make an SUV. I don't know why some of these brands insist on making an SUV. I mean, like Lamborghini has got one, and
Yep.
I guess if the market is there and people are willing to buy it, you buy it. But I don't know. I think on the SUV aspect of it, I think Enzo Ferrari himself might not approve of that idea.
Enzo be rolling over in his grave, but just getting specifics on their SUV. It's called the Puro Sangure. So
Say that 3 times
in
fast.
my best Italian accent, it's starting at $393,000. It's a low slung SUV, so we'll put a picture up on it if you're watching on YouTube. It's kind of it's a cool looking car. So I mean, at least Ferrari did the SUV world justice. It's got 715 horsepower. It's got the 8-speed automatic transmission, which all the cars have now. Including, and it comes in paddle shifts. But, it's not terrible. And I have a feeling it's probably going to sell quite well, And so Enzo, despite the fact that he would be horrified by the production of an SUV, I think it's probably going to sell quite well. And, Ferrari's going to become even more profitable.
Oh, yeah, I would agree with you on that point, Charlie. I mean, I mean, they're not going to do it if they're not going to make money on it. I mean, they make these cars so they can go racing. They basically only make race cars for the most part until this, up and coming SUV, and I'm just looking at the Ferrari lineup, the current Ferrari lineup, I have to say, having scrolled through the entire Ferrari website, which is pretty amazing to do, I still think the prettiest Ferrari is the LaFerrari.
Oh yeah, I agree.
It's just a beautiful car, and it just looks like an absolute demon.
Yeah, no, it really does. And it's funny you bring that up because the history on the Ferrari brand, Enzo Ferrari, they would present a design to him, and that was his test. He said if it looks mean, then he liked it, and if it didn't look mean, then he would have them go back and revise the designs. But just such a cool storied brand. I mean, as you touched upon, Ferrari built street cars so he would have money to race cars, and he really like the street car division was I won't say an afterthought, but it was strictly to fund the racing campaign. And
exactly.
Yeah. So, there's not, the only other company that's sort of like that is Lotus, and Colin Chapman was building cars. He was building street cars to basically afford his race car habit.
To fund his racing habit. Yeah,
yeah.
That's exactly right. I think that's probably, I mean, Maserati, they all kind of started a little bit like that, but Ferrari's the one that has stayed true to that principle.
Yeah, they really have. And if you watch the film Ford versus Ferrari, it's funny, they didn't portray Ferrari in a particularly favorable light because at the time he was dominating Le Mans and Ford was dead set. Well, Ford tried to buy out Ferrari and Ferrari said no. And he used Ford's offer to springboard to a better offer from Fiat. But he had been dominating Le Mans and it took Ford quite a few years, as I recall, about four years before they were
4 years, I think it was.
Yeah, before they could take down Ferrari. But they didn't portray Ferrari in a particularly nice light. And he was just
everyone wants to take down the giant. I mean, I think the same thing's happening right now in Formula One with Red Bull being as dominant as they are, and everyone kind of wants to take them down a notch. And hopefully, I mean, honestly, I'm kind of jumping a little bit into Formula One news, but I mean, Ferrari seems to have built a car that seems a lot better this year, more capable of challenging. And maybe they are the ones who topple the giant this time instead of being the giant that is toppled.
Yeah. Well, as you might have heard, that was our little reminder that we got to go to commercial break. But we are going to come back and we are going to talk about fun things you can do with your Ferrari. A little bit later in the show, we're going to talk about a Ferrari that you could buy today that'll probably double in price. And then at the very end, we're going to talk a little Ferrari Formula One. But this is the Speed Traveler Roadshow, and we'll be right back. All right. Welcome back to the Speed Traveler Roadshow. And Chris, I'm joined by my friend Chris, and he's normally here, but he's down in San Diego today. And we're talking about the Ferrari marque and how they made so much money last year and what they've been doing, right? And Chris, you brought up during the commercial break, you brought up one of their new cars, and I had to go check it out on the web. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, part of the Icona series, the Monza SP1 and the SP2. And what's funny, SP1 for a single seater and SP2 for a 2-seater.
Yeah, because I mean, I guess if you're going to buy $1 million+ car, like, why do you need a second seat?
Well, I can think of a couple of reasons,
right?
But that's for Speed Traveler After Hours. I mean, it's such a beautiful car. If you look at it, I mean, how would you not want to? You teased this segment of fun things to do in a Ferrari, and quite frankly, I have a one-word answer, and it's drive it, or 2 words, drive it.
Drive it, yeah. Or just drive.
Just drive.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard not to like all of the cars in the Ferrari lineup because they do such a great job, even with their most modern entries into the motorsports world. There's just such a nice retro aesthetic to it, and they really bring that forward here in the Monza SP1 and SP2. But if you just look at all the cars, the current iterations are just stunningly beautiful and appropriate for just about any era.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool that apparently these cars they're in limited productions. We're talking about the Icona cars. They're in limited productions, and you had to have bought Ferraris in the past to even be on the list. But I think that what's interesting about these is that these cars will be worth a fortune down the road. So, that's part of what they're selling is they know that they limit production to 600 cars or whatever it is. They know that the people that buy a lot of cars from them are going to appreciate the fact that the cars are going to appreciate like crazy. And that's kind of cool. Like the people that support the brand the most are the ones that get invited to buy these cars. And, those people that buy them are rewarded in the fact that these cars are going to only go up in value.
Yeah, it's kind of an amazing thing. This is a status symbol car,
right?
And they're beautiful cars, but it is a sound financial investment.
Right.
It's kind of crazy to say that, a car being a sound financial investment.
Yeah, it's funny because we have a friend named Kat, and she swears that buying designer labeled purses is actually a sound investment strategy. I mean, I know nothing about
Have you seen
purses.
Kat's purse collection? It's pretty intense.
It is pretty intense. And she swears that it's like similar to buying a Ferrari. If you get the limited edition ones, they only go up in value. So yeah, it's really interesting that these high-end brands have kind of taken that approach. And good for Ferrari. You know, they figured this out. Actually, they figured it out, I think, quite a while ago when they brought the F40 and the F50 along, didn't they?
Yes. And that's, if you look at those two models that you just mentioned, you'll see those still prominently showcased on their website. I mean, it's still very much a part of the Ferrari heritage and history. And those are a couple of the cars that you will always see on their website.
Yeah, no, I agree. They always show the older models, you know, and what inspired the new models. And yeah, it's just a great brand. But let's talk about some fun things you can do in a Ferrari. And we're going to talk about this in the next segment, what Ferraris that you can buy today that'll probably double in value. But the Ferrari Club of America, which is ferrariclubofamerica.org, they have all sorts of fun things you can do. And you don't have to buy $1 million+ SP2 to gain access. I mean, you can buy a $30,000 1981 Ferrari Mondial and get to join the club and have a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up the Mondial because that is now, I think, the best buy you will get from Ferrari. And oddly enough, I mean, it's maybe not the most iconic looking car in the world,
right?
But it's going to maintain its value. It's only going, if you can keep that car in good nick, it's only, again, it's going to be that investment car.
Yeah.
You know, not to the same level as, say, perhaps a Monza SP1, but but it will continue to increase in value. And by the way, it's a Ferrari, so it's going to be fun to drive. It's going to have that iconic sound, a Ferrari
right.
sound.
It's going to have some Italian, quote, charm, end quote, which means that the buttons are going to be sticky. The window won't always roll up. But, you know, that's part of the fun of these cars. And obviously, people aren't keeping them out on the street. They're going to be in garages. So, you know, what the heck if the window doesn't roll all the way up?
Exactly. And by the way, you're going to roll the window down anyway.
Exactly. So you're just saving a step.
Exactly.
But yeah,
I think Ferrari's taking that step, making that step for you. Again, we keep coming back to the Monza SP1 and 2, but they don't have windows.
Yeah. You know what? That's actually a great point. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about fun things you could do with your Ferrari. Before we go too far into the Ferrari Club of America.org, I just saw a call. We're in Southern California. If you do own one of these 80s Ferraris, 80s TV shows and movies are really hot right now, and they're always looking for 80s. And it almost doesn't matter where you live because California did a great job of scaring off all the movie companies and so production companies. So if you live in Georgia, if you live in New York, if you live in Jersey, all places where there's lots of production right now. So if you've got an iconic 80s car, you just need to look for a couple. If you Google it, you can find some places that you can go to where you can register your car for use in photo shoots and movies. And you can make some money, and it's not bad. If you do enough of them per year, you make enough to keep the car running well.
That's very true. In places like Vinti, you can register your car and they will call you when they need when someone has a production that's going to use a car like that. And a car like, a Mondial, it's going to draw a premium. I mean, we had great success with the Lotus Esprit,
right?
And putting that into commercials and photo shoots and music videos and things like that. And because of its, iconic value, it drew a premium, and the Ferraris are going to be even a little bit more valuable in that capacity. So yeah, it's a great way to not only own a fun car to have, but also to then earn income on that car while you own it.
Yeah.
It's better than driving an Uber.
Yeah, right. And that's also better than Chris and I have owned a lot of cars, a lot of vintage cars. We've bought and sold a couple hundred cars, and cars like to be driven. When they just sit in the garage, things deteriorate. And so this gives you a good reason to go earn some money and get your car out of the garage. But let's go back to the Ferrari Club of America real quick. So they've got really fun events. It spans the globe, basically. They've got events everywhere in every nook and cranny. Inside the United States, they have some really fun road rally events where you go and drive around, and you've got clues, and you've got to go be at a certain spot at 1 p.m. exactly. And if you get there early, you get penalized. If you get there late, those are really fun. They also, for those people who really don't want to be driving their Ferraris too hard on the street, they also have lots of Concours d'Elegance events.
Beautiful.
Yeah, go ahead.
Beautiful car shows, and they're all over the place. So you really want to, it's a great way. If you don't own a Ferrari, you want to go check out Ferraris. The Concours d'Elegance events are a great way to do that. And it's put on your finest, and bring in your flask and have a good time at one of these Concours d'Elegance.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. Go into the Concours d'Elegance events. If let's say you're interested in a Ferrari 308, you'll find a bunch of Ferrari 308 owners all there, and they're going to tell you what's good, bad, or not good about those cars. And that's the cool thing about going to a Concours d'Elegance is you go and talk to the owners, and they'll give you a lot. These guys own the cars. They're going to give you a lot of insight on what breaks, what needs servicing all the time, and such. And that's invaluable. You can't find that information anywhere.
Right. And that is absolutely key data to be able to acquire. And, and then the third thing is Charlie, Ferrari does a lot of track day events. I mean, our buddy TJ has done this on a regular basis. And, they'll bring out their semi-trucks full of cars, current cars, not so late model cars.
Right.
And they're track-ready cars. You can do a full-on Formula One type of experience, but you're the driver of some beautiful Ferrari cars. Yeah, and track days are super cool.
Yeah, they're super cool, and they go to iconic locations. I know they've got one at COTA. They have one out here at the Thermal Club in Southern California. They go to Watkins Glen. I mean, they go to some of the best tracks in the country, and it's not cheap. So you definitely going to pay. But, then again, you're driving a Ferrari on a racetrack without a speed limit. So, I mean, that's priceless.
Absolutely. Well, it's not priceless if you hit a wall.
If you stuff it into something, it's not priceless. But that's some of the things you can do with your Ferrari. As we said, you can join the club for as little as probably $30,000 with a Ferrari Mondial. But we're going to take a quick break, Chris. And when we come back on the other side, we're going to talk about Ferraris that you could buy today that are probably going to double in value. This is the Speed Traveler Roadshow on KHTS Radio. All right, welcome back to the Speed Traveler Roadshow. I am Charlie Frank, and I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Evertsen. And Chris, we're going to talk a little bit about Ferraris that you can buy today that are probably going to double in value.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to borrowing someone's credit card and putting some of these into our garage.
Yeah, exactly. As part of the Speed Traveler sponsorship program. If you've got an amazing one-off Ferrari that you want one of the Speed Traveler knuckleheads to drive around a track, then let us know. Reach out to us.
I'm okay with taking it up and down Mulholland.
Yeah, that's fair enough. The old back in the. It's funny you bring this up. Chris and I did a video, and it's about Mulholland. You can find it at the Speed Traveler Instagram, or excuse me, not Instagram, but YouTube page. And it's called Ferrari versus Volkswagen. And we took the whole 55-mile drive. Well, actually, we didn't take the entire 55-mile drive because part of Mulholland was closed because of a rock slide. But we took most of the 55-mile drive on Mulholland from Universal Studios all the way to the beach in Malibu. And it was really fun. We had a choice of either a Ferrari F430 or the venerable Volkswagen Beetle, 40 horsepower. But
From
yeah,
double digits to triple digits.
yeah. But let's talk a little bit about Ferraris you could buy today. And the top of my list is the Ferrari Testarossa. It's a V12. If you're watching on YouTube, we'll put a picture of it up there. But if you're not, just Google it at one point. But the Ferrari Testarossa was made from 1985 to 1996. They made about 10,000 total copies, actually just under. It was 9,960 or something. But it is a V12, and it's a Ferrari, Chris, that they're just never going to build anything that looks like this again. And I think when you're looking for a classic car, that was one of our criterias for the Lotus Esprit that we bought, is finding something that they're just never going to build that looks like that. And the Ferrari Testarossa definitely fits that bill, doesn't it?
It really does. I mean, it's a beautiful car. I mean, we should talk a little bit of a funny story about Miami Vice. You know, when they were filming originally the TV show back in the 80s, and they're filming that show, and they're using a replica Ferrari Daytona, and Ferrari as a brand, they got all pissed off about that,
Right.
and they said, no, that's not a real Ferrari. Here's a real Ferrari, and that's how they got the Testarossa for Miami Vice.
Yeah, and it
Don
was
Johnson, Crockett drove in that show.
That's right, Crockett and Tubbs. It was a white Ferrari Testarossa, and I don't know where that particular car is gone, but that car will definitely carry an extra hefty price tag because it was used on Miami Vice. I think it was given to Don Johnson at the end of the series. I think Ferrari gave it to him.
I think that's exactly right. And it was the original Testarossa. I think it was actually I think it was model year it was a 1986 model year, I believe.
Yep.
So it only had the one side view mirror. That's the big distinction, because there's two generations of the Testarossa, the 85 to 90 and then the 91 to 96. And the biggest distinction between the two is the first generation had only one side view mirror on the driver's side, and the second iteration from 91 to 96 had two side view mirrors, one on the left and one on the right, not both on the left.
Yeah, let's talk some specifics on those numbers. You can find a Testarossa for as low, according to Car Gurus this morning, as low as 124,000, and for the lowest mile one we could find in the first generation, 85 to 90, we found one for $200,000. So, you know, at 124,000, I mean, it's not cheap, but for that car with a V12 with that crazy styling, you know, I mean, I think there's going to be a time at some point where people are going to be like, yeah, you remember when you could buy those things for 125 grand? And the second generation of the Testarossa, they renamed it. It was called the 512 TR, which stood for Testarossa. And they really took a lot of advice, and they made that car better. And those 91 to 96, there were less of those made. And those, you know, they started about $200,000. We saw a one for $250 today. We saw one for $350. That's a lot, but apparently it's an amazing car. They really learned their lessons on the first generation, and they put it to good use. And Ferrari owners that we know absolutely rave about that car. So, you know, it's at the top of our list. I mean, it's not an inexpensive car, but let's talk about a little more inexpensive Ferrari, and that's the Mondial, which we mentioned a little earlier.
Yeah, and I love the Mondial because they took a lot of the styling of the Testarossa.
Right.
You know, let me rephrase, a lot of the styling of the Testarossa came from the Mondial.
Right.
And it definitely does not look like a Testarossa. It definitely looks more like a 308 squared off.
Right.
But they had a 13-year run. It ran. They manufactured them from 1980 to 1993. And like you said, Charlie, you can find these at a pretty good price. You know, I mean, as low as $30,000. I'd be nervous to buy a Ferrari at $30,000 because what the heck's wrong with it? You know you're going to spend at least that much to fix it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But you can find good ones in good nick for, you know, not a whole lot more than that.
Yeah, I agree. We saw one this morning for $45,000. It looked fantastic. Had engine work already done on it. And, you know, Ferrari is not for everybody. You know, I think we better put some asterisks here. And we're not recommending you go out and buy the cheapest Ferrari you can find, or even a medium priced Ferrari, because when they break, they are very costly to fix. And if you're a handy type person, you could probably work on them yourselves and save yourself a fortune. But when Ferraris go wrong, it's never an inexpensive bill. So, you know, we're talking about these cars. I mean, yeah, you can buy it for the cost of a Hyundai, but, you know, it is probably going to break on you at some point, and it's going to cost a lot to fix it. It's $25,000 bills are not unheard of in the Ferrari world. But,
yeah.
But with that said, if you buy one for 30 and you spend 25, you're in 55, you're in a really exclusive club. And also,
yeah, but spending 20 grand on fixing a Ferrari, or 25 grand on fixing a Ferrari, that is a challenge in itself, because, I mean, you have to go to a Ferrari certified mechanic. You can't just go to Joe Blow and expect him to work on it.
True.
You know, you have to go to a Maranello certified Ferrari mechanic to be able to get the Ferrari parts. And here's the thing, Ferrari has the parts for that Mondial, for that Testarossa. They have the parts. But if you want to get those parts, you're going to pay a premium, and you got to go through what would be considered the proper channels. And that can be very challenging. So if you find one that someone's already done that work, and they have the paperwork to show that they've done the work, I definitely recommend looking at in this case, the Mondial, one that's already been pretty much taken care of in the service sense. I mean, tires is a different story, but all that internal stuff, you really want to have that done. I
agree. And the nice thing about the Mondial is you're looking at an 8-cylinder and not the 12-cylinder. So, you know, in theory, it's going to be a little bit less to work on the engine. But let's talk a little bit about the Ferrari California. So the California was replaced by the Portofino. The Portofino is the least expensive Ferrari now at $246,000, but yeah, but Ferrari California it's a good looking car. It's front engine, and it's 2 seats. It looks a little bit, you know, like the older Corvette, kind of like that Grand Touring style. And you could find those, they made it from 2008 to 2017. You can find earlier ones for about 85 grand. And although they only come in a paddle shift, Chris, they're not, I mean, they're great looking cars.
You know, it's a fun car. It's not my favorite looking Ferrari, I will admit that, but it is a super clean car, especially if you can find it in the coupe, not the Spider. I prefer the coupe much more personally. It's a beautiful car, and Lord knows I'm not going to say no to a Ferrari California. You know, I mean, you can find them. I think realistically, the number you're going to find them at is about 100,000, 105,000, 110,000. That's going to be the real number
for a decent one. Yep,
for a decent one. And again, you mentioned the V8 engine in the Mondial, and this has basically that same engine. I mean, Ferrari's been making this V8 engine.
It just gets bigger and bigger. The displacement's bigger and bigger.
It gets bigger and bigger, but but they've been making it since the 70s. You know, this is an engine that they've been, you know, Niki Lauda basically won a lot of races with that V8 engine. They went to a V12 eventually as well, but, you know, in Formula One ranks. But that V8 engine's been around a long, long time, and they've been kind of making it the same way ever since, and they've really perfected it. I mean, they've really dialed it in. So it's a great motor.
Yeah. So there you have it. There are some of our picks. I think the Ferrari California, I don't think either of us are saying that that's going to double in value. The Ferrari Mondial, if you buy it right and you bought one that's already had engine work, that for sure could double in value. And then the Ferrari Testarossa, if you find a decent one for $125,000, I have no doubt in my mind that that car is going to double in value. You just hope that you don't have a major engine issue along the way. But yeah, so that wraps up that segment, Chris. We are going to come back and talk Formula One, and we should have a lot of fun. They just the latest Netflix series, F1 Drive to Survive, came out. We watched it the other night. It was pretty entertaining. But this is the Speed Traveler Roadshow on KHTS Radio. We're going to take a break and be right back. All right. Welcome back to the Speed Traveler Roadshow here on KHTS Radio in Newhall, California. You can also find us anywhere you get your podcast downloads, also on our YouTube page, which is The Speed Traveler, and Instagram. Of course, if you've got a comment, question on anything we talked about today, or really anything car related, feel free to hit us up on Instagram at The Speed Traveler. And Chris, we have some exciting news since we're talking about Formula One. The Speed Traveler is launching a new Formula One only podcast.
Yeah, it's going to be kind of exciting. We actually did our first shoot of the Speed Traveler Formula One deep dive, as we like to call it. That's our initial naming of the program. We did shoot our first video or program a couple days ago, and it's more of a shallow end. It wasn't a deep dive. It was kind of a shallow end team and driver introduction. But it's going to be really fun because we're going to preview. Every episode is going to preview the coming coming race. And that's going to be for the first race coming up just this weekend, Charlie. The first race of the Formula One season starts this weekend. And the deep dive is going to showcase what's gone on in practice, in the practice session, and showcase a bit about what the first F1 race is going to be all about, what's going to be happening. And then every subsequent show is going to be a review of the previous race and a preview of the upcoming race. So it'll be a little bit of something for everyone in the Formula One world. It should be a lot of fun.
Yeah. And if you're interested what our picks are for this weekend's race in Bahrain, you can go to wherever you get your podcasts, or you can go to our YouTube page, and you can see that actual broadcast. I think it should be up a couple days before the race, and you can hear exactly what our thoughts are and who we think is going to win. But let's get back to...
what's going to be really fun about that, though, Charlie, because a lot of those episodes are going to be filmed on location, some really cool locations, around Southern California and elsewhere. And that's what's going to be really fun. We're going to be able to have a bit of a live audience for some of those broadcasts. It's not going to just be a studio show. It's going to be, we're going to do remote programs at some great locations. I mean, we were talking to the folks over at Peterson Automotive Museum about doing a couple shows there and some other really cool locations.
Yeah, no, it should be really fun. But let's get on to some Formula One news right now. As you mentioned, the first race of the season is coming up this weekend in Bahrain, and they had a test last week, and it sounded like it went pretty darn well for Ferrari.
Yeah, I mean, they did go 1-2 as far as fast laps are concerned in that test, which, and all the comments are suggesting that, you know what, Ferrari showed up and they might have something for the Red Bulls this year, which would be great because it'd be so much fun to see more of a race at the front of the race. I mean, the mid-pack racing last year was absolutely incredible, absolutely incredible. But the Red Bulls kind of walked away with it. Other than the one win that Carlos Sainz got for Ferrari in the 2023 season. Hopefully Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz can better that this year.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the teams do sandbag. I believe Red Bull, the all-conquering Red Bull from last year, which won every race except for the one you just mentioned with Carlos Sainz. But the all-conquering Red Bull, I believe they were 5th and 6th in practice times, but you have to think they're doing a little sandbagging there, don't you?
Oh, there's no question in my mind that they held something back. I mean, they've notoriously done that every season at the pre-testing, but still the fact that the Ferraris look really, really good. I mean, if you watch some of the footage that's available on YouTube and like Sky Sports, we have the Sky Sports app. If you watch some of the footage, you can really see that the Ferrari looked like it had something, which is really cool. And so I'm excited to see what Ferrari can do. And unfortunately, it looks like the Mercedes of George Russell and Lewis Hamilton are actually going a little bit backwards.
Yeah, I mean, imagine that. And, along those lines, 7-time Formula One world champion Lewis Hamilton shocked the F1 world by announcing that he's going to Ferrari in 2025.
Crazy stuff. But, like Sebastian Vettel said many, many years ago, not that many years ago, if you drive a Mercedes, you're a Ferrari fan. If you drive a Hyundai, you're a Ferrari fan.
Right.
Everybody in the motorsports world is, in their heart, in some place, a Ferrari fan.
Yeah.
So it's kind of every little kid's dream to be a Ferrari driver.
Yeah, no, that's true. And Hamilton, it was rumored he was going to retire at the end of this year, but good for him. He's going to hang in there for a few more years, and why not? Fernando Alonso, who's racing for the Aston Martin team, is showing that you can be really competitive at age 42. Hamilton, I think, is only 37 or 8, so he's got plenty of years if he wants.
Plenty of years to go, and hopefully Ferrari can provide him and Charles Leclerc a car that is very, very competitive under the new guidelines, because there'll be some new technical guidelines for the season. So I think that might create a little parity amongst all the teams, and maybe even making it a little bit more difficult for Red Bull to be as dominant. And you mentioned Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin, and he and Lance Stroll did a really nice job at the preseason testing. I don't know if they've made huge gains. It's hard to scale or see how well they did. But I got to tell you, I mean, Fernando showed such speed in the season opener last year. And quite frankly, I think Lance Stroll had the drive of the race last year in the first race, because he showed up with 2 broken wrists.
Yeah, and you're sort of touching on what I was going to bring up next, and that is the Netflix, the smash hit Netflix show F1 Drive to Survive. That show just released their new season. I love how they do that. They open up the new season of shows right before the Formula One first race of the year, and that first episode, it was all about Aston Martin and the Stroll family and how successful they've been.
Yeah, and what they want to do with Formula One. I mean, Lawrence Stroll is not there to, just drive cars. He's there to win a championship. I mean, that's one of the reasons they brought Fernando Alonso to the team. And I'm going to say that Aston Martin is going to win a championship here in the next few years.
Yeah, that's a bold prediction.
It is.
It really, and if you, like I said, if you haven't seen F1 Drive to Survive, the new season just dropped, and people are so into it. And just by watching that show, I learned more about Lawrence Stroll, who's the owner of the team. Such a sharp business guy. He's a French-Canadian billionaire. He got into F1. His son was a driver, is a driver right now, but he hung out with his son as they went through go-karts and then some of the junior formulas. And the father, Lawrence Stroll, saw an opportunity to get involved in Formula One. He saw the amount of money that was involved, and he bought the old Force India team for, I believe, $140 million. And he recently put in apparently another $70 million to keep it rolling. But recently he sold 30% of his new Aston Martin team. He brought Aston Martin in for $300 million. So he got all his money back, and he owns 70% of the team still.
Still has the majority ownership. Yeah, obviously a sharp man. And you're right, Charlie. I mean, if anyone is a huge racing fan and they have friends or family that are not into Formula One, have them check out the Netflix Drive to Survive program, because it really is an amazing showcase of the drama and the stories around the teams, around the drivers, around the mechanics, about the tracks, all that stuff that is kind of really, really interesting. And then it also, on top of that, does showcase all the great racing action you see out on track. So yeah, it's just a phenomenal show.
Yeah, and since we're talking about other shows, make sure you check out the Speed Traveler's new Speed Traveler F1 Deep Dive, or Formula One Deep Dive. And we were inspired. We were in Las Vegas for the Las Vegas Grand Prix, and we were shocked that people were coming up to us and asking all about Formula One.
Yeah, that was kind of cool, I mean, because we haven't done a lot of focus. We've only focused the last bit or a segment of our show on Formula One, but that seems to have touched a nerve with a lot of fans. And you're right, Charlie. I was really impressed and surprised, pleasantly surprised, People knew who we were.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, if you think about it, most of the, if not all of the Formula One content comes from the UK. And sometimes you can't help but think, but the British commentators have a little bit of a little bit of a rooting section for the British drivers.
Right. And that's to be expected.
Yeah.
It's like, I would love to see Sargent do well.
Yeah.
You're
talking
as
about
an American. I'd love to see the American driver do well.
Yeah.
But it's going to be fun. We're going to have, I think we're just, like you mentioned, Charlie, we're going to just offer a slightly different perspective in the Formula One deep dive than the viewpoints you get from the British commentators and Danica Patrick.
All right. And with that said, Chris, that wraps up another episode of the Speed Traveler Roadshow. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, or you can listen locally at KHTS Radio in Newhall, California. I'm Charlie Frank, along with Chris Evertsen. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back next week.